All right, this is Jeremiah with the Bigfoot Society podcast. Today we have the privilege of talking to Yami, or Cryptid Chat Girl, and I'm going to go ahead and have her introduce herself, kind of give some background before we get into the interview. Go ahead.
All right, so thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So, a little bit about me, Jeremiah. Man, I was actually going through this, like kind of rehearsing this in my head to my mom today. Um, and it's very like if I just I've just done a lot of things that don't really like add up to what I'm doing right now. But just in overall, like I am a college student, super senior, graduating or maybe not graduating. I don't know what's going on right now. But I've always been super passionate about cryptids, the supernatural, the paranormal, pretty much all my life. So once like all the craziness happened, um, I was like, you have a lot of time on your hand. Why not like really dedicate it to connecting with other people and like really doing some research into the things that you really like? So it was kind of just like a shot see if how other people would react and stuff. So thus from all this came Cryptid Chat with Yami, and so it's just kind of a Instagram page right now that we're slowly building to a podcast. So we're just going to talk about different cryptids, different legends, conspiracy theories, and beyond. So that's just
That's
kind of me in a
awesome.
nutshell.
Very exciting. Very exciting. That's awesome. Yeah. And if you're not following Cryptid Chat Girl on Instagram, you really should. There's a lot of good content on there. So great job. And you really had some good responses so far.
Thank
Especially
you.
noticed that today from when you asked questions about, you know, what, what you're into. So that's kind of cool.
Hmm.
Um, something well, first off, I'm curious. So what are you studying in college, if you don't mind me asking?
So this is the funny part. I'm actually finishing studying ministry. So
Oh, cool.
that's really funny because most people think like the religious and the paranormal and whatnot, those are like two separate worlds. But I'm actually finishing up a degree right now in children's ministry,
Okay.
which absolutely again has nothing to do with the cryptid community. But I, you like what you like and you're passionate about what you're passionate.
Yep. Actually, if you know Small Town Monsters, Mark Madsky, the gentleman who works with Seth, he's actually a minister, I believe,
Yes.
in I think in the Lutheran Church. Maybe don't quote me on that, but yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. He is going to be on the podcast eventually.
That's
Um,
awesome.
or we're working back and forth on it. So I noticed today that you had mentioned that you're into flying cryptids, Mothman,
Yes.
stuff like that. What kind of draws you to that, would you say?
I think it's just the idea of a winged cryptid in general. Like Mothman and the legends of like the Thunderbirds, those are like on my top of my list of cryptids. So like
Hmm.
as a kid, I always loved birds. So I think the fascination just kind of grew into winged cryptids as I got older. And Mothman was actually one of the first like really big cryptids that I learned about as well. So I think it's just spiraled from there, this idea of like, cryptids on the ground, like, I don't know, like I feel like just the idea of something hovering above me is like equally terrifying and exciting all at once. I don't know.
That's funny. Yeah. Yep. Um, so I'll mention where I'm from. I'm from
Mm,
central Iowa right now, so Des Moines area. Um, and if you want to mention where you're from, that's
mm,
cool too. I'll leave it up to you. But we have actually a local cryptid out here in the Van Meter area. Have you ever heard of this? The Van Meter visitor.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, that's
If
awesome.
you're familiar with the story, it's pretty awesome. Like we actually have a festival, a day festival out
Mm,
here every year, and it's a lot of fun. Every year it's getting a little bit bigger. I've been going for about 4 or 5 years so far, but it's cool because they have a tour that they lead through the town, and they show you, okay, here's the bank, where one of the guys was shooting at it, and it would have been hanging out. The Van Meter Visitor, if you don't know, is pretty much would have been a winged cryptid that was like a pterodactyl, but was shooting a light out of like a horn on its head, right? So, anyways, in the late 1800s, this winged cryptid just started terrorizing the town, freaking out the banker and all the top dudes in the town. They were trying to shoot at it. And at the end, they end up actually chasing it to the outskirts of town. There's a mine, and we actually walk there to the mine on the end of the tour. And so pretty much there's a posse, which every good story ends with a posse chasing the thing. So the posse chases the Van Meter Visitor. I believe there's a smaller one too, to this mine. And they just shoot it up, but it somehow gets away. And there's people that say that they still see it around. And it's an awesome local legend. It's probably my favorite, I would have to say, local cryptid legend. But we have all sorts of people that show up for that festival. We have I don't know if you've ever watched Finding Jay on like Amazon Prime with Jay Pachochin. He's a big Bigfoot guy from Wisconsin, but he made it down since, both in the Midwest, so that's cool. And paranormal people, and guy from Missouri that was talking about how he travels around the Midwest to with his kids to different weird things like UFO houses, which are kind of cool if you've ever looked into that. But yeah, it's a fun cryptids and legends and all that. It's a fun way to kind of see the US, right?
Oh yeah.
And imagine what's out there. So you're into to winged cryptids, but I also had, here's a good question. So I had a question where, so you thought about your podcast, right? You're getting a podcast together. What are your dream guests that you're trying to get on your podcast?
Oh man.
Yeah, I know it's tricky, right?
Honestly, like there's so many people. Like there really are. One of the first people I really would like to get, just because I'm actually based here in Central Florida.
Okay.
So like the outskirts, Orlando, Kissimmee area, everything's 15 minutes from Disney kind of deal. So we don't really I guess the closest cryptid that we have is skunk ape. So I've followed a man named Dave Shealy. If I butchered his last name, I'm so sorry.
Dave Shealy, okay.
So he's basically known as kind of like the Jane Goodall of skunk ape community.
Oh wow,
and
that's awesome.
He lives down in the Everglades area, and I've kind of like followed his work, and he's dedicated so much of his like life to actually finding evidence of a skunk ape. And I really want to talk to him in person. Like I first heard from him actually, like he had an article on the Smithsonian Magazine, and I was like, man, he seems like a really cool dude, and he's just right down the street. So he'd be one of the first people I kind of want to just talk to, just as somebody that's a Floridian, and just see what he's experienced down there.
Yeah, that would be really cool, because I mean, you'd have a great interview right off the bat, because you could, you'd have all these things you could connect with, being in the same area. That's pretty cool. Like there is one guy I like to get on my show is I believe his name is Ronnie LeBlanc or LeBlanc. He's from Expedition Bigfoot. But he's from the Massachusetts area, and I'm originally from Western Mass. So
that's awesome.
I don't know if you've ever heard of any podcasts about Bigfoot up in the Western Mass area, but man, there's some crazy stuff out there, some crazy woods. But before I segue too much, so for the listeners that maybe haven't heard, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can you explain kind of, so is it half skunk? Is it half ape? Or what's the deal with the skunk ape guy?
So skunk ape is basically like the Florida Bigfoot. Okay. All the eyewitness accounts that I've combed through and whatnot, like the descriptions are very, very similar to the Bigfoot in size, in builds, in like the overall features. But the name skunk ape really comes from the fact that like eyewitnesses really account that before they see him, they smell him. So it's
Mm,
really like a
okay.
very sort of putrid sort of scent that
Sure.
I guess just encompasses him. So that's where the
Yeah.
name actually comes from. So he's our Florida Bigfoot down here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And he's seen a lot, or is he kind of hard to see, or what do you think? Lots of reports.
So the reports that I've seen, if it's in Florida, it's usually in the Everglades region, all
Okay.
the ones that I've seen. But he's been spotted up to the Arkansas area.
Oh,
So
really?
so it's really like the southeastern side of America that we've seen a few reports. I would say
Okay.
less than, for example, Bigfoot. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, we still do get a few every now and then, and it's really cool.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Really cool. Um, Here's a question for you. So, not to totally shift gears, but it might be in a way. So, you got the cryptid thing.
Mhm.
How do you feel about well, I guess this could involve cryptid too. Have you been watching the whole Secret of Skinwalker Ranch TV show that's going on?
So I had vaguely heard of the Skinwalker Ranch, like
Mm-hmm.
the legends behind it. And then I actually had a friend that recently was like, "Hey, have you been seeing what's going on with like Skinwalker Ranch, like how they're really
Yeah.
documenting it lately?" And I was like, No, I guess I'm gonna have to take a look. So I had seen not the series that had just started, but I had looked at a few videos on YouTube just to get familiar,
Okay.
and I was blown away. This is kind of like, I was joking, I'm like, this is kind of like the Olympics of like the supernatural. It seems like everything and anything kind of happens
Yeah,
on
it's
that
pretty wild.
land.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, if you haven't watched the documentary that came out about Skinwalker a few years ago, Jeremy Corbell, that's really good. You should check that out. But also this new show on history. It is kind of a reality show, but I think it's good to get to know Skinwalker through
Mhm.
the really scientific stuff that's happened in the past. And a really good source of that is the Jeremy Corbell documentary, and also like read some George Knapp stuff, listen to his coast to coast interviews, stuff like that. And then see, the thing is like when Bigelow was in charge of Skinwalker, you didn't really get to know what was going on. And now with this new guy who owns it, um, it's crazy because you're seeing the whole thing, and the access to it is wild. I've actually ran into a guy on TikTok um, that is from Utah, and actually met the new owner of Skinwalker Ranch at a Halloween party last year. So I've been kind of doing back and forth with him, and he's actually been invited by Brandon to visit the ranch. He just hasn't really taken him up on it yet. So I'm like, dude,
Mhm. You
what
gotta
you
do
gotta do is you gotta take him up on that, and you gotta do a TikTok live from Skinwalker Ranch.
it.
That'd probably be like the first TikTok live from Skinwalker Ranch, right? But
That'd be awesome.
yeah, it's pretty wild up there. And they actually, there's a really good podcast by Rogue Planet that's just coming out about kind of like talking about each episode after it airs, right? But I'm trying to get them to talk about uh the Bigfoot sightings that have been
Mhm.
seen on Skinwalker, and they're kind of like, yeah, we've never seen that. We're yeah, whatever, So I'm like, there's got to be something there. Like the show talks a lot about radiation, and
Yeah.
that there's an astrophysicist, and he's trying to figure out stuff. But I kind of want to get to the cryptid stuff too, because there's bring on the dire wolves and the Bigfoots. So yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So let's say if we ever, oh, sorry. So for people listening to this in the future, life is fun right now because we're in the coronavirus
Oh yes.
of 2020, unless that never finishes and this is just a new normal forever. But we won't get too crazy on that. But so let's say if you ever get to, leave the house and you graduate school, do you have like a dream? Let's say if you could go anywhere and and you're kind of studying cryptids, where would you go?
I actually have a list that I've been compiling over the past
Okay.
few years of
Okay.
I want to start in the US. So the idea
Hmm.
for me was to basically kind of do like a supernatural road trip and just go off. So
Oh, that's
start
cool.
here in like Central Florida into the like greater Florida area, and then from there just kind of trail off. So like
Okay.
one of the places like I want to go to in I guess Central Florida area first off would be Casadega. I'm not sure if
Hmm.
you've ever heard of
I've never
Casadega.
heard of that, actually.
Casadega is the psychic capital of the world,
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm
and
gonna
it's
write that
a
down.
very tiny little town.
Okay.
Literally, I think it's like not even an hour and a half away from where I live, and it's just a spiritualist hub. So
Wow.
it's very, very strange. I know I've seen a lot of people actually go down and just recount a lot of paranormal activity down there, and
Hmm.
it's just very interesting to see. Like some people view it as like kind of like a vortex. So like it seems to be an area that just accumulates like a lot of energy, and it's just right next door, kind of.
Interesting.
So
Okay,
I'd
that's
kind of want
cool.
to pop down there, and then from there go off. I really want to visit some of like the iconic places. So like Point Pleasant.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I have to go to the Mothman Festival. I got to do
Hmm.
it. I
Yep.
really wanted
Yep.
to go this year, but we'll see.
Yeah. I
Plans
don't
kind
know.
of changed on that one. So I've just
Hmm.
kind of been amassing a list and like just going. I kind of want to go like state from state if I can and just visit all these iconic places. Just go off and see where it leads me, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. What I really want to do someday is go to Cliff's Bigfoot Museum in Boring, Oregon, but I also want to go to the Bluff Creek area and see all that stuff.
Oh
Go to
yeah.
like Bigfoot Books. That bookstore out there has like every book you could ever want. With cryptid stuff and whatever.
Hmm.
The hard to find ones too, and I don't know. I just like the like kind of weird like. If you look into it, there's a lot of like Bigfoot themed bars and like restaurants out there.
Yeah,
It's
there are.
kind of fun, right? And to visit those. There's also like I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures of like Monster Mart in Fouke, Arkansas. That's kind of cool. You should look that up. Like
Mhm.
the building is just like a huge Bigfoot, like with its arms over the top of it. It's pretty wild.
I
Yeah,
love creativity, man.
yeah. Um. Oh, okay. I got a good question for you. So so you're going
Mhm.
into children's ministry, right? Or you said something of that regard. So let's say sometime, well, or something like that. So let's say if we have kids listening to this,
Mhm.
have you ever thought of how would you encourage like a kid that maybe wants to get into like looking into skunk ape or Bigfoot or things like that? Have you ever thought of that before?
I have. So my interest in cryptids and the paranormal stuff I got came from when I was a kid, actually. And
Okay.
just being a kid watching when like the Travel Channel and the Discovery Channel turned like really like paranormal, and like that's when they really started like having like the really big
Hmm.
iconic shows and whatnot. So
Right.
like by watching those shows is what like got me interested as a kid
Okay.
from the very beginning, and then like actually having kind of like a cryptid experience as a child too. Um, cemented the, I guess you can say, the interest. But like I guess like if kids are watching it, like I would just, one of the biggest things is just I love to encourage the curiosity. Like no matter what
Yep.
your age, I think we all should explore the curiosities that we have, like the passions that we have. So like it doesn't matter if you're 7 years old, but if you watch something on TV or you saw a book or you read something, you listen to a podcast and you're like, that sounds
Hmm.
interesting. I really like, I really do encourage people to like, if it sounds interesting, go and research it. Just learn a little bit more. Uh, you never know, honestly, where you're like, where a curiosity or an interest in something will take you.
Oh yeah,
So,
totally. I totally agree with that. Yeah, Yumi, that's awesome. Like focusing on like cultivating that creativity in the next generation. That's pretty awesome. Um, you kind of touched on that this stemmed. Can you maybe go more into detail about like the cryptid experience that you had when you were younger? That could be kind of
Ye-
interesting.
So I was like really thinking about it too, like preparing for like the podcast, because I've been
Hmm.
thinking a lot about it lately. But when I was about 7 or 8 years old, so it's been a minute since
Okay.
this happened. I actually lived in Colorado at the time.
Oh
We
wow.
lived in on a military base in Fort Carson, and
Okay.
we lived in military housing, but we had like a large backyard, and our specific like housing area what had like a large backyard, a field, and then like a tree line, this large highway that was randomly there, and then
Okay.
it actually connected to Cheyenne Mountain in the back, which is where NORAD and all that is from.
Okay.
So I was with my younger sister and one of our neighbors just out in the backyard, and we were playing at the time. And I just remember like feeling something watching us,
Oh, weird.
which isn't, you never want that feeling
Yeah.
ever.
No. No.
But we were just out there and it was in the middle of the day, and I felt something just staring at us. So I looked over to the tree line, and I remember seeing it looked like a black cat.
Okay.
And yeah, I kind of took it like as I mean, there's stray animals. It's not uncommon on the military base to have seen like a fox or even a bobcat just wandering around.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
I don't know, it just like really struck me, and then this cat like started to kind of pop out of the tree line toward us.
Mm,
And as it got close, like I realized this is not a stray cat, because one, this
mm.
is a lot larger than a normal house cat. This is a lot larger than a dog.
Wow.
And I just remember seeing like, again, it was just all black, and it had like a long tail.
Okay.
Just something within me said run.
Yeah. Get out of there.
Just run. So I
Yep.
remember I just like looked back at my sister and our friend, and I just literally yelled run. Like I started screaming and I
Wow.
pointed at the animal, and they saw it, and we just booked it. And the thing is that when you're a kid, you don't, logic would say, yeah, I'm gonna run to my house. As a kid, terrified, logic told me I'm going to run to the playground where I can climb on top of the swings and be above it so it can't get
Oh
me.
my goodness. It's a big cat. It can just jump right up there.
I wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking that far into it, I guess.
Wow.
So me and my neighbor, we were able to climb up the swing set. And
Hmm.
I remember my sister, she was like 3 years old at the time, 3, 4, poor thing. She couldn't climb up, and I just remember looking down and being like, she's gonna die. She's gonna die.
Wow.
This cat was like, it was just kind of like crouching over to us. It wasn't really running at us. It was just kind of like observing. But
Hmm.
I was terrified. And then in that moment where I'm like, my sister's dead, our one of the dogs in the backyards of another one of our neighbors, so this really big German Shepherd, started going crazy. Like it started
Okay.
barking. It started like actually like jumping at the fence near us, and the cat looked at the dog, and I guess the noise freaked it out. I'm not sure, but it bolted back to the tree line.
Wow.
And in that moment, I just remember I dropped down from the swing set, I grabbed my sister, and I ran for my house. And I just remember crying and like trying to explain to my mom what happened, and she didn't believe
Hmm.
us.
Right.
She's
Yeah.
like,
Of
you guys
course.
just, you probably saw Bobcat, you saw something else. It's not what you think. And to this day, she's like, okay, whatever. But like, it's always stuck with me. Like, it
Wow.
traumatized me as a kid to have seen something that big and to have just felt like the terror. Like, it just felt like something was just not right. It was real crazy.
That's incredible.
Crazy.
Yeah, I totally get that feeling where it's like something's watching you. Like, I used to do a lot of hiking in New England, and it's like sometimes you're in those pine forests and you're like you can feel like, oh, it feels like a cougar or something is like
Mm-hmm.
staring me down, right? Oh man.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it
Um
was wild time.
I can't believe it, but it is almost already the end of our time. And when you don't have a Zoom account that's paid up, Time is limited, right? So
I've
we'll work on
learned
that.
that.
But yeah. Any other before we go, is there any how can people um get in touch with you, or keep in touch with you, social media,
Mhm.
what you're working on, stuff like that?
So the main way, if you just want to get in touch, I'm always on my Instagram account. So
Mhm.
you can search up Cryptid Chat Girl, and you'll find my
Okay.
Instagram. I post daily different like cryptids, and I'm gonna start posting like also different like conspiracy theories and lore, just like hyping up to the podcast that will be eventually. I'm gonna be starting it on Anchor, so that'll just
Okay.
kind of
It'll be
broadcast
everywhere.
out.
That's
Yeah,
great. Yep.
exactly.
Hmm.
So just Instagram. I have a
Okay.
lot of free time lately, so I'm
Perfect.
open for messages. If anyone wants to just chat, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, it's been fun chatting with you tonight, Yemi, and it feels like we just started. So we'll have to maybe
Yeah.
do a follow up in a few weeks or something. We'll see. We'll be in touch. But
All
thank you
right.
again
Sounds
for coming
good.
on the podcast today.
Yeah, and thank you for having me as well. It was a good
Yep.
time.
Have a good one.
All right, you too. Bye bye.